working this way. We've had to ask the admin for the privilege of paying out of our own pocket. Everything we pay for ourselves. We registered ourselves to tournaments, find hired judges, we've booked our own plane tickets to book our own hotel rooms. We put too many debaters in a hotel room too small and too far away from the tournaments in order to have a chance to afford these tournaments. But we're lucky. We can still afford these tournaments, we still have the resources to do so. There are far too many who do not. So it's been rough for us, and we want others to see the experience of a small school of debaters. Point number one, the existence of small school programs cannot negate that they are inherently disadvantaged. Point A, there's some small schools that succeed, but on net, most small schools end up failing, and the most dominant schools are very big. Point number two, success in activity is based upon money and resources. We see that in Point A, travel camps, we see hired coaches and hired coaches and more individuals. This creates exclusion for small schools, and each tournament, it ends up being exponentially more expensive for a program that does not have as much money as one that is large. Point three, the status quo cannot solve. The small schools have no voice in the status quo. Point A, who listens to a school which cannot comprehend the inner workings of the MPII and therefore is not represented there? Who will listen to a school with no ability and no time to draft and vote on legislation? Who will listen to a school that has no adult to represent and no coach to make decisions for the team? Who will listen to students with no adult to guide them through the processes and the workings of the circuit? And who will listen to a school with no wins and poor performance on the circuit? We understand that nobody would have listened to us in our sophomore year. Act 2 is going to be the criticism. Point 1. Criticisms are not the norm of debate, and many stand behind performances are not the norm of debate, and many stand behind unwritten rules against this position to secure their own personal standing. Point 2. Empirics prove that the ballot is key. A culture of accepting status quo methods where they benefit big schools can have been seen in the LD pool. We see many advocates in the LD pool having failed to actually achieve any change and made the circuit in that form of debate far more exclusive because nobody was willing to listen, because there was no incentive for change. Point 3. We have been personally disincentivized to run this case because there just isn't a high success rate in tournaments. We are sacrificing a traditional chance of the ballot as a form of a plan for change. Point 4, we see here systemic policy failure. Parley is addicted to the system that excludes so many because the teams with clout have no incentive to overturn the status quo when they're getting so much stuff for their college applications off of the method which currently exists. Therefore, we present the rule of the ballot. Vote for the team whose advocacy best improves the state of Parley. Again, vote for this team whose advocacy best improves the state of Parley. The ballot is the endorsement of our message, and it is the endorsement of our method. It is the approval for the way that we can improve debate today. Solvency as follows. MPDL legislation is not enough. We are tired of being used as a passive... Never mind. This is therefore, we set the alternative. We affirm that the following demands must first be met before the Parley community can move forward. Number 1, we see a better resource allocation. Therefore, we prep or camp resources need to be allocated and made public to underserved schools. Point 2, TLC qualification needs to be focused on bringing debaters from underserved schools. And 3, urban and rural debate leagues, which are not seen in Parley right now. Solvency is as follows. MPDL legislation is not enough. We are tired of being used as a path to spawn to squeeze legislation through. There are countless voiceless debaters behind us. We are using our values as we're using our positions as relatively successful debaters to speak out for these systemic injustices. Points here. Point 1, ballot is key. Everyone express point A. Show everyone in this room actual advocacy is key until everyone has the opportunities to compete. Point B, we can ignore entire online discussions, even promises to do better, but nothing will change until there is an incentive to do so.
You can't ignore the on ballot.
Point 3, this is finals at Nueva with this many people in the room. This is the key mechanism through which debate can actually be achieved because of how many voices are listening here. This is our only chance for the rest of the year in order to get this message across. Point 2, performances are key to the internal links for solvency. Point A, it disrupts the status quo. It enables the reconstitution of power away from current methodology that exists right now. Point B, only a radical rejection can actually solve this problem. We see this problem in LD where non-radical legislation was entirely unable to solve it, and we see this continuation and this trend occurring in Parley. Point 3, performances are better than the status quo. Performances recognize disciplinary power. In order to get good legislative power in the actual circuit to change anything from our current state, I'll get it at the end, we must constitute a radical rejection of status quo methods. Point 4, do not buy vote neg to vote act. Listen to the people who actually lived through it. Listen to the voices from the small schools who are now bringing you this advocacy. Some would be, an L for us is a complacency in the face of structural oppression. It is saying that the voice to actually stand up and oppose the structural oppression is not enough. The only thing that they cannot ignore today is an L on their ballot. And this is what we need to give it to them in order to maintain a reform form of debate in the parley circuit today. Take your question.
So you say this is your last chance to run the argument. Are you not planning on attending any more tournaments? Why is that?
Our ability to go to Stanford is severely limited by our school, and it is unlikely at this point in the year that we will be able to qualify to the TOC.
So this is a lot. Okay, gotcha.
Essentially, this is likely our last full tournament in our entire high school careers.
Congratulations.
So these results solely wrote both the affirmation in today's round. Thank you for your time.
Okay.
I didn't hear anything about fireworks.
Bonne chance, je ne sais pas ce que tu vas dire.
I'm devastated.
Ça, c'est
Alright.
difficile.
I don't
I'll
care.
talk to you a little bit about pigs.
It's fine. Use it again next year. I will.
You guys
Keep
want a
doing
copy
it
of
until
roll of
someone
ballot
runs a
results?
real case.
What, the roll of the ballot is whoever provides the best system for parliamentary debate?
Hold on.
Vote for the team whose advocacy best improves the state of parliament.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
This is actually the first time we've had a fight.
Bonne chance, là.
I think that's the first year.
Yeah. Okay.
Order? I think I know what the order is.
Whatever you talked about. I've never. Y'all are in for a wild ride. Okay.
1 sec. Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to be gone.
That's okay. We have multiple faculty members in. We'll make sure they're all gone.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, no problem. Yep, told you. Security wants to go.
Everybody good?
Yes, ma'am.
Cool. So I'm gonna start by saying that I feel you. We also come from a small school. We also understand what it's like to feel like other schools have more resources. Neither of us have ever been to a camp. We go to a school that sent 2 teams to this tournament. We are not someone who is hugely big on the circuit. Also, similarly to you, we've had some competitive success. My partner and I won state championships by not knowing how to do tech debate. This is the first time that we've ever hit a K. So I feel you in the sense of that it can often feel like this circuit is moving in a direction that is alienating and that it's hard to compete in for people who don't have all the same resources of schools like the one that we're currently in. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and talk about, I think we agree with you that there are a lot of problems with parliamentary debate on the top. But when it comes to your roll of the ballot, to say that whoever should win this round is the person who provides the best advocacy for parliamentary debate, that's where things get problematic. I want to give you judges a little bit of backstory. About 15 minutes into prep time, they had Eugenia come downstairs and tell us that they would not be upholding the resolution in today's round. If they wanted to have a genuine discussion about the merits of parliamentary debate, where it can go in the future, and what should happen with parliamentary debate, they would have at least told us before prep time began. And when we asked Eugenia, so what do they want to talk about? What are they going to affirm? She said, I can't tell you, isn't it clear enough? Which, is not to shoot the messenger of Eugenia, but that the fact that they refused to tell us what they wanted to talk about here, and that they didn't even want to give us any time to prepare, let alone the 5 minutes that they gave us before this round started to know that they would be running something other than the resolution, clearly shows that they're not interested in figuring out the best way to change parliamentary debate today. Instead, they're interested in running a K in front of you all in a way that makes it so that we can't have a real discussion. So, with that, I have a proposal for our opponents, which is that if you would like to have a discussion about the best way to make parliamentary debate going forward, I offer you the chance to forfeit this round, and we can all sit here and talk about how parliamentary debate should change and should look going forward. But at this point in time, at the point where you give us 5 minutes to prepare, we are not going to have the most educated discussion on it. Yeah.
Yeah, would it be possible to make the final round a draw so we can spend the rest of the time just discussing issues that have been facing small schools?
No.
Okay.
Or actually, all the judges get to weigh in. I say no.
They just gave up all of our speech now.
I say that for me.
Stop the timer.
Okay. Since I'm a judge and not involved with tournament administration, and I'm not involved with tab, I think that's more a question for you and less.
I'm asking you to vote. No. I'm already here.
This is your activity, so my vote is yes if that's what you want to do.
Like I said, Alan, you need to vote.
Now you gotta. Wait, Alan, you waited too long.
See, if you had made 5 arguments as to why we should get
I'm
offense off
willing
of
to
Alan being
allow the
uncomfortable.
final round to be a draw, but if the tab can allow it. But I am fine with having a discussion instead of a debate.
I don't want to make their last round a
We don't think
shitty
you're bad
debate.
people. It's okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Pause the clock, I guess. I will call the tournament director.
This is success, folks.
Both win. Congratulations. You have usurped the system. And didn't debate feral hogs, and you made me sad.
I'm so sorry.
You're not that sorry.
But now I know that they shoot them from helicopters in Texas. Isn't that all you want me to know?
Maxine learned something incredibly valuable.
Okay. So I guess when would this round have actually ended, Joel?
I don't know.
What time did we
5:50
actually start?
Started. So 50 plus 40 is 30, whatever the number was.
So what time would we actually stop?
6:30.
6:30.
So okay, let's call 30 minutes. That's 6:30 plus 15 for us to have dithered and given an RFD for our discussion, because I'm going to make you do it now. So I will run a clock.
Does that work for y'all with like pickup
Yeah,
times and stuff?
it's okay if like I think it would be better if like everyone contributed.
Of course, the round is over. There's no voting to happen anymore. So congratulations, you both win the Nueva tournament. Which means I still think technically we haven't had an actual final round yet. 3 years in a row.
The curse.
We've never actually had a final round. This was the first time we actually had a final and it collapsed.
You're welcome.
You're not sorry.
You've been
So-
saving the feral hogs for 3 years now?
No, only one, but that's fine. Okay, so we need to chat.
Yeah.
Why don't we? So everybody should be involved, Huge included. Come on up. Random parents, you are welcome to be involved if you would like. Okay, that's fine. Yes.
I take it I should continue to record the conversation.
I don't particularly care if you do, but now since everybody is involved, everybody must concede to be recorded
Okay.
and they're talking.
Consent.
Whatever.
Consent. Oh.
So you all have to go down the line. Do you agree to be recorded?
Sure.
Do you agree to be recorded?
Yeet.
Gia,
I love attention.
Mr. Taylor, Alan, I don't care. Joel.
Yes.
Okay, Jacob.
Sure, I'm not old enough to say whether, but yes.
No, you do actually get to say. Do you care?
Yeah. No, I'm
You
fine.
don't
with it.
mind.
I'm fine.
Madam.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
I'm good.
We're all good.
Mazel tov.
So maybe I'll move this over there
I
so that it
guess.
has a bigger view.
I guess. Okay.
Damn, you're so upset.
I'm very upset. I wanted to see if they had feral hogs, and y'all denied me.
Oh,
Found to make a legitimate meme.
Sam. I'll prep an app and next drive with feral hogs and debate myself. If it makes you happy.
Yes. That will be our first practice round. We're gonna get this debate.
All right. So that's my first comment. Is you didn't give me feral hogs, and I hate all of you.
We hadn't. If it wasn't this round, we would have had an app for feral hogs actually.
Yeah, we have a prepped out for feral hogs.
Wait, no way.
We didn't have a
Yeah, I don't. Animal morphism, that's what I said.
Yeah, animal rights is a clear negative.
Animal rights.
They eat animals.
They're like destroying
But they're not
animals.
sentient. You have a choice. The K would function. Like that's the obvious next strat, especially with this panel.
So so right there, my first comment's gonna be right there. If the only valid next strat is a K, there's an issue with the resolution.
Because
Yeah.
we can't win that.
Because
Oh, there's a state's counterplan. There's also a question of like how many other. There's lots of neg. I'm just saying the most obvious next strat is can't.
If the most obvious next strat is a K, there's a problem with the
Yeah.
resolution.
Nope, incorrect.
I think it depends on who you are, because for me, the obvious next strat is always a K.
Right.
But for someone else, like that would probably not be the case.
Yeah, I think it's.
Not be the case. Haha.
Yeah, state's counterplan would have functioned. Politics would have functioned.
I'm sorry.
There are various levels of econ, like you said. There's a whole tourist industry in Texas around this.
And
So there
Hawaii.
are. Huh?
And Hawaii.
And Hawaii, right, which is all tourist industry. So, and you could even have made arguments to the effect of like, look, the people who like go for hunting don't tend to go to Hawaii. Like this is actually a new market they can tap. So like there are real arguments to be made on both sides. I'm saying my reaction to it, I'm gonna run Anthro. I'm not a straight up debater though. So, but regardless, I will let my rage about the lack of feral hogs arguments go at this point.
Is it recording?
Yes, I'm fully on record as demanding a debate about feral hogs.
Everything's
So
on
that's
video.
fine. Yes. Okay. So Y'all
Yeah.
started this, why don't you
No,
start?
I think well, I think a key thing to note is that there's like a lot of different types of small schools. So in like we didn't get to read the whole thing. We don't have time to prep all of it. But we in our discussion we talked about like there might be urban schools, right, which are closer to tournaments that may not have the resources to be able to actually like attend, like money, coaching, etc. And there are also a lot of rural schools that don't really have the capacity to go to all these tournaments. Like Central Valley doesn't have a lot of teams that like come to parliamentary tournaments. I think a couple years ago there was Jesuit High School, but ever since then there haven't been really that many teams from the Central Valley coming in. I think that's partially because so many tournaments are either present here or in SoCal that it becomes prohibitively burdensome for more rural schools to be able to attend. So one of like we said in the one of the things that we wanted to do was maybe try to pool resources together to set up things like rural debate leagues, just as there are urban debate leagues in more rural areas.
Personally, when I address this issue, I think one thing that's of note is our definition of what a small school is in debate is kind of skewed. When it comes to Parley, what would constitute a small school are still schools that have a lot of resources. The debaters there, generally speaking, and like us, maybe, you know, our school in and of itself has resources. It doesn't have the support. It doesn't want to support teams in Parley. So I think a lot of this issue is just marketing the activity, making it seem like it's like I'm not exact. There's a lot of reasons I surmise as to why schools don't necessarily want to compete in debate, and especially not Parley. But I think that's probably one of the largest barriers we have here. Not having enough teams is kind of what's leading to, I think, not having enough tournaments. It's what's leading to, you know, higher costs and having tournaments dispersed all over the place. If we can make the debate, or if we make the activity something that more people are willing to participate in, and all different types of people are willing to participate in, I think that's probably the best step that we can take to increase the availability and the accessibility of how we can do it.
You guys will be the debaters in the round, so you get other first word, and then we'll open.
Okay.
Or the second word.
I think, well, I'm glad we're doing this because I agree with what they said, and I don't want to have to like shoot them down or say that it's not true or it's not your experience. I think I feel you on the like big schools, small schools point. It's definitely, I mean, even if we like move resources aside, there is a significant difference. Like for example, when we were at States, we weren't just the only team that like broke at States, we were the only team that qualified to States from our school. So for Parley, so it is a little bit different feeling to walk into a room and be like, oh, there's 12 teams from my school here to help me do team prep and to help me do all this stuff, versus like, I know we went to a lot of tournaments last year where it was just us two and it was team prep, and it was like, well, we're really team prepping, like there's a lot of benefit, all two of us. So I think that there's definitely like, in terms of what you're saying about like culture, like there are places where it's big and they're gonna have huge teams, and you know, huge teams over time breed like resources being wanting to put into it and things like that. And then there's areas where it's small. Where we live, there's an urban debate league in like San Francisco, Oakland area, which does like hold, but that's for policy, it's not for Parley. So I agree.
I mean, I'm in agreement with everything that's been said so far, but I think also in addition to like the importance of like, yeah, marketing the activity, and encouraging debate in rural and urban areas, and just kind of increasing the pool, as you guys said, trying to get schools to support it, I think there are like things you can do, or that we, or that the community can do already in the activity that we have more control over, because I feel like the deep institutional changes we're talking about are obviously like important and would have lots of good effects, but they're an awful lot harder to do, and I think there's a lot of smaller steps that could be more useful in terms of like, now we're going back to debate, but cost benefit, like how much would actually like effort would it take to do some small things versus how much would it like potentially cause a difference or help debate be like, I want to say more inclusive, but like also just like more teams can do well, like even if they have things that are holding them back, like traditionally that shouldn't be holding them back in the actual activity beyond just like institutional change. I think that's where like I think we should see more change happening now, because that's things we can control.
Floor is open.
So I have a question for the Gov team. So you had a list of demands that largely had to do with reallocation of resources, which sounds great. I mean, I think we would all love to see more resources go to schools that have fewer resources. How do you imagine that happening?
Yeah, so I think for like my entire time debating, I think one of the biggest gripes I've ever had was basically the lack of prep that our school has, mainly because when we've always been generally a smaller team, so we can't like do all these prep files, all this case stuff extensively and have everyone be able to contribute, because if you have like a school that's like really large, and I'm gonna use Evergreen as an example because I'm friends with everyone at Evergreen, but like if you have someone at Evergreen, right, and that's like what 20 something debaters on the team, they're obviously gonna be able to put in way more like even generic prep files, and that gives a huge edge in rounds because it gives everyone at least some sort of generic to fall back onto. And I think more resource allocation for me personally, that would definitely be things like videos from camps, covering just all sorts of issues, things like prep files or like briefs that can help someone who's like just joining the activity to start catch up, and even if you don't have a coach, you can catch yourself up on all of these important issues that are going on in the world, and make it a lot easier for small school debaters to be able to actually compete within the conference round. Because I've had a lot of experiences, especially when I first started debating, where I just didn't know what the topic was about. I spent like most of prep figuring out what it was about, and by that point, I didn't have any generics to fall back on to be able to actually engage with my opponents, and it was very frustrating a lot of the time.
Can I jump in on
Mhm.
this?
Hey, the floor is open.
So when it comes to like open sourcing files, so this is the thing that I've been trying to do more within these years, and I just want to like be making sure that like I'm open sourcing the right stuff, because oftentimes I'm worried that like, oh, I think this might be important to like a small school debater who wants to like go into K-debate, or like a small school debater who just wants like a solid 50 state CP that isn't like 5 pages long and super obscure. Like I guess another thing that I wonder is like, because you were talking about camp lectures, how helpful is it to open source like things that are like lectures in a document or something? Because like that's like one of the things that I put out in the most recent thing that I open sourced was like an offense defense lecture that was in a document form. Like it's probably kind of badly written because it was written by me at like 2 a.m. But like I guess, I guess like the question is like, what do y'all think, at least from y'all's small school perspective, is the best kind of thing to open source? And like what do y'all think that is being open source that isn't necessarily important?
I think for these issues, I think we might be necessarily losing sight of the scope of the issue. Because when we discuss open source, it's oftentimes people who are very entrenched in the community, who've been involved for a lot of time, saying that they're going to open source their critique files. Most debaters I've talked to, in my experience, JV and varsity combined, and those who quit and those who stayed, don't know what a K is. This kind of stuff, I think, is like, we open source the things that we think is great. We might even open source the file that we think we spent the most time on, or is like the most conducive to us winning in rounds. That I don't think is actually that useful to the kind of people we're discussing today. I recall in my freshman year, I had a packet prepared for us by our team captains, 30 pages long, that went into very shallow detail, just some very basic principles of debate, like what a counterplan is, what the affirmation team and negation team, like what kinds of offense might be running around, what is like a uniqueness of Lincoln impact, something like that. I haven't seen that document around recently, and I don't see any parallels to that kind of resource that is being open source. And I think it's probably more conducive to our interests in order to be looking from that kind of standpoint, not from open sourcing Ks or like, you know, any of these high theory arguments, but more kind of starting from the bottom, making it more accessible, making it so that more people are willing to join.
So more so like things that are like, here's how offense and defense work. And
That
like,
sounded great.
that's
Yeah.
You should all look at it. It has a really silly diagram on it.
Are
Yeah.
we including
So like,
that in the manual you?
Wait,
Huh?
yeah. Are we
Nueva is
talking-
literally writing
Yeah.
a open source tech manual right now.
yeah, so we're trying to do that. It's not going, I think, as on schedule as we would hope it to go. But it is a thing that we're working on. Should we? Okay. I guess the question is like, do you think it's more helpful to like open source it as like a full manual, like when it's all complete, or like should we just open source whatever we have, like whenever it's done?
We should finish it. People can make requests for second edition.
Yeah, but I think it might be better to like split things up in sections, right? Because you have these small schools that are, I guess, in different stages, or like different types of small schools. Like I talked about previously, right? You have people whose school have never had a debate program and are just starting out and want to do debate and think parliamentary debate is a good idea. Resources like what are speech times? Here's how you structure an argument. Things like that are probably most useful. Whereas a school that, like us, for example, who have like some amount of institutional knowledge but just don't have support, like financially, either financially or just the manpower to be able to prep things, I think more introductions to different topics might help us allocate our time more efficiently.
If I may make a quick observation, I think that we have skipped completely over harms and gone immediately to solvency that is functioning as a very abstract thing right now. I think we should back up to the original actual question posed by the K, which is debate accessible? Whatever small school means, this is a school of 400 people, most of which have not spent their entire K-12 here. Does that mean small? Not every family who goes here is wealthy, for example. Many are not. Well over a third, maybe 40% are not. So we have very generous boards of trustees that give lots of financial aid. I think we should return back to that question because I think Joel started this off in a good spot. What does reallocation of resources mean? Does that mean we normalize waiving of fees? Does that mean we relocate tournaments? It's already hellish, as I'm sure you know, Joel, and I know Les knows, to get people to leave their immediate region to come to a tournament. If it's more than, say, an hour-long car ride. That seems to be roughly the limit. Is that good? We should talk through that. How do we incentivize people to actually function as a community, to come together more frequently? Because it's not just a money problem. And it's certainly not a will problem.
May I interject and ask the panel what the time frame is for this discussion?
We will stop at 45.
Okay.
We went to the end of the round plus 15 minutes.
So it's 45, okay.
Yes. Go ahead, respond.
I think that sort of similar to what they're saying, but like in terms of like, is debate accessible? I always think of debate as being a huge learning curve. And I didn't realize how much it was when I was learning it, because it was like, it just all happened at once. Like I didn't know what debate was until I went to my first tournament, right? Like for Parlay. And then you just kind of get smacked in the face and you're like, okay. But I feel like now watching our novices learn how to do it, this is the third time. And it's like, whoa, there's so much you have to know to even just feel like you can confidently walk into a round and be like, okay, pretty much what happens here, I'm gonna be okay, I'm gonna know what I'm gonna say. And for some people, like, confidence is less of an issue, but I feel like in terms of like debate being accessible, I wish that there was more push for, I don't know how to phrase it, but like like, I don't know how to find the middle ground, because I think tech debate has a really important role to play in a different area, but like understanding that for a lot of people, they're still figuring it out, and it's like, I don't know, I think it's can be a very cutthroat environment, which isn't the best thing in the world.
Can I chime in?
You can chime in. Floor is open.
I have like a kind of weird like debate experience. So I went to Mercy High School in San Francisco, which we found out this week is actually closing because it's out of money. It's closing forever. It's been there for 68 years. And so I did debate for them. I did like novice PF for like a very brief minute and like some extemp, some original prose and poetry. Yeah, so that was fine. It was terrible. I was really bad at it. But like, and then I transferred back here, and I actually went here from kindergarten to 8th, and then I came back here, and like changing debate programs. I have never actually found, like I definitely have always found tech debate much more accessible than case debate, in that like being like a marginalized person, like being like a queer, black, biracial woman who's like disabled, like I've always found like being able to talk about things that actually matter to me has been inherently more accessible and just feels more important to me than talking about like case and stuff like that. And I get that like people enjoy talking about case, and like I get that there's like maybe some catharsis to like not talking about issues that affect you at all. I've never felt that, and I think coming from super small school that's literally so broke it has to shut down to Nueva, right? And like I'm a Nueva kid, but I'm like not a super affluent one, right? Which I kind of hate that stereotype that we're all super rich, because like more than half of us aren't, but that's another thing. And so I feel like, I don't know. I don't know what I was really trying to get at. I just think like I don't think the biggest accessibility problem in debate is like tech versus case, because I think they're like I've always thought tech is more accessible, and I also think that like I guess that's my main point. I don't think that's like, at least in my experience, that has not been my biggest accessibility problem.
I think going on the tech debate versus like play debate thing, given like the way that I generally assert myself, I think my response might surprise some of y'all, but like I think that tech debate and lay debate are equally inaccessible in certain ways, right? And I think that like everyone in the community needs to be combating like these issues, because you have tech debaters who are like, oh, this is a kid from a small school who hasn't ever learned debate. Let's spread them out with like a highly technical K, and let's like read like 10 theory shells. Let's bring in stuff from LD as well that like nobody in Harley has ever had education about. I think that introducing like new meta and like new arguments is definitely good, because it means that our debate format can like kind of advance and move forward and have more exciting things. But at the same time, do you really need to be doing that against like a small school team who also like doesn't know how to flow spreading, or like hasn't even heard of spreading before? Like, do you really need to be doing that? And then, but on the other hand, I also think like, I guess in lay debates, sometimes like I feel very excluded in that. So this is a round that actually happened at TOC last year, but there was a round in which the judge said something that implied that like, hey, by the way, if you had like put in like a personal story about the topic, like you probably like would have won the round. And for me, that personal story is like, hi, I have a very stigmatized habit and / like neurodivergence that has like a lot of relation to the topic, like a very visceral but like not very easy to see manner. And so that also like has felt very accessible to me. So I think like the question is, how do we make sure that, first of all, like tech debaters stop being assholes, because like we really are a lot of the time. I guess, and second of all, how to like make sure that the tech debaters who are being assholes, like make them realize that they are being the assholes they are, but also like making sure that everyone knows like it's like, I don't think like the divide is between like, do we do tech debate or do we do lay debate? It's the divide is more so like, how do we make sure that tech debaters who are exclusionary include lay debaters, and also how do we make sure that lay debaters are also including people who can't access the kind of debate that they like to do?
So I agree 100% with what you just said, Eugenia. I think you're right that both lay and theory debate or tech, they have their places where they're accessible and the places where they're inaccessible. And this is coming from Joel a little bit. He's my coach. You know, what can you do at El Cerrito? We learn lay debate. And the issue I think that comes up, and the reason why like lay debate schools and small schools are feeling, I feel like, frustrated a lot of the times, is that as you go higher up in a tournament, what you get more and more is often tech judges. If we're looking at the judge panel right now, all of you are open and conducive to tech arguments, which isn't a problem, because again, tech and lay debate are both potentially valid activities and both, you know, valid for education. But the issue comes up when in a debate round, when both are presented, tech is often defaulted to as a priori or always like before the lay. So if you have a tech team and a lay team and both are trying to use the style of debate that is most accessible or entertaining, or just the style of debate that they want to do, that they're comfortable with, the issue arises that often what happens is that the tech will win, not necessarily because they are the better debater overall, but because they are the better tech debater in the nature of learning tech. And even if the lay debater is, you know, the best debater you have ever for lay debate, you're not going to have a chance to win because of the fundamental structure of how flow judges or tech judges evaluate those kinds of arguments. So you have an inherent issue in, sure, both kinds of debate are accessible and inaccessible at the same time. And I know that, you know, flow judges love writing on the paradigms. I'm open to whatever kind of round you want it to be. But often, if there's a single like theory argument that gets made in the round, it's no longer whatever round that people want it to be. It's going to be a round about that theory, and that theory is going to come first and foremost, which often presents like the learning curve that we talk about in the small schools, that even if, you know, you want to go out of your way and learn some level of theory, or you want to learn some level of tech, you have to, all the pressure's on you, right? You can't, it's not like, I feel like to a certain degree, where you can come up in 20 minutes with your own like theory shell, because these have already been established in the community. Judges have told us several times that we haven't used the right words specifically when we try to run any kind of lay topicality or anything about that. Even if there's clearly demonstrated abuse in a round, if we don't say the proper words or we don't weigh it the way they want it to be weighed, even if they say in their paradigm, we'll vote for whatever you want. They don't actually. They tell us, hey, you got to use this word, you got to do it this way, which makes it hard. So I think that while both styles have their appeals and their lack of appeals, I think there's a fundamental imbalance right now in Parley in the way that we approach what is considered high-level debate, and in the way that judges like to think that they judge, and in the ways that they actually do judge.
I think I've, sorry.
Go ahead, John.
I think I've had like a very similar experience. I am not a very clear speaker, and I don't flow very well, but when someone goes too fast and then they refuse to slow down, it's kind of frustrating for me because I don't want to like go up there and read 8 minutes of please slow down, because I would feel very bad if I turned around into that, and then, but I also miss a lot of arguments, and it's like it sometimes costs us round if I can't like catch certain things, but I also don't want to turn the entire round into, hey, we haven't had that much experience, can you please slow down? Because if I do want to engage substantially, right, but there's no way for me to say please slow down for the love of God in the middle of their speech, right? Because even I have this habit personally, like if someone calls clear, I get clear, and then I kind of just like slide back, and then Andrew calls clear for him. Yeah, it's usually him just calling clear the whole time. But I think it's kind of the attitude of I don't want to be the person that kind of ruins the round by turning it into a please slow down kind of environment.
Yeah.
Really briefly at TOC, we had a round where we said slow down, and they said, hey, and they kind of slowed down. We said you didn't slow down enough, and they said this is TOC. Like, what do you want from us?
So I did my best
and we
to
were
run.
like,
I did my best
So
to
I
run
feel
when
you.
I thought of like a speed K or whatever, speed disad or whatever it was. I think, what was it? One of the judges said, I sympathize with you, but I didn't consider or something.
Yeah.
And then the other one didn't vote for it because I didn't call for the ballot. So.
Yikes. Yeah, I think like honestly I guess I might be biased because this is in my paradigm, but I think like type judges, like regardless of whether they prefer theory over K or whether they think T is over theory or like whatever logistic that or tricks or like whatever that is, I think like accessibility claims, like can we please just make it a norm that accessibility claims are a priori above like literally anything else, like please.
Yeah.
Because like and just like make that like an established norm.
This seems like a risk of a race to the bottom here.
I guess my worry is like I would rather vote down someone who's reading like I would rather be able to comfortably intervene and be like, yeah, y'all are being assholes, stop spreading out this team, than like vote for a team that technically won on the flow but decided to read like some ridiculously complex version of D&G against a team that just wanted them to slow down. Like
Yeah.
I think
Go ahead.
You go.
Yeah. It is 6:40. I don't know if the panel planned any kind of summative talk or action, but we've got 5 minutes.
We probably should. Do you want to finish your thought and then we'll do that?
yeah, I don't know. I guess like, and I think there can always be a debate about like what accessibility claim has to come first, right? So like for example, if someone is feeling like they can't access around because they got misgendered like multiple times repeatedly, whereas another team is feeling like they can't access the round because they couldn't understand their opponent's arguments. I think like that becomes a question of like, yeah, you can't understand me because I'm literally crying and I can't get my thoughts together because it's very triggering, or like I literally don't even like know what claim you're trying to make. Like I think that's a debate that can be had in terms that aren't like they dropped the disad to the perm of the like I don't know, I'm just spewing words, but like do you kind of get what I mean? Like I think that's a discussion that can be had that isn't like here are 10 flow words.
I think personally.
We're gonna call it there.
Oh, okay.
Panel will close it out because Les is right. We do need to go home. All right, down the line, Gia, you're up. You can also choose to cede your time.
See my time.
Wow. Okay. No, I mean, I'm really glad that you all got to voice your experiences. And I think, I started out actually, I did speech in Congress, and then, I, went through the rings and, learned about tech debate, I guess. So I understand where you're coming from, and I understand the frustration. And, ultimately, this is a problem that isn't going to be solved in one, 45-minute discussion, but it is a problem that has to be solved by your community. So like having this discussion, keeping it up, talking to other debaters about it, you know, that's where we're gonna see really great things. So I'm really happy for you all that you were able to do that, and thank you for sharing your experiences.
Something that I would add is that just as we were discussing ways to make flow debate more accessible, one thing that could be, I think, could be done to make lay debate more accessible is for more tournaments to have implicit bias training for judges like the Evergreen tournament did a month ago, and I think this should apply equally to flow and lay judges. All of us in this room have implicit biases along things like race and gender and disability and other axes of oppression, and I do think that some of the things that like Camille talked about being a problem in lay debate, while we can't get rid of all of them just by talking to judges, we could reduce the harm that such things cause to the debate community by ensuring that all of our judges are educated on and aware of these things.
Ooh, now I get to say. I'm going to choose to play devil's advocate. I think you all have been praised.
Okay, boomer.
I think we have patted ourselves in the back pretty thoroughly today. So I'm gonna say a bunch of stuff. People watch.
Not too much.
Well, I've got a timer right here. I know. There it
3,
goes.
2, 1.
My timer started.
Fred, no else.
As a K debate elder, I find it a little convenient this round ending this way. I'm old-ish.
Okay, boomer.
This avoids a debate you don't want to have because it's not your game. That's a damn good lay team.
Yeah.
This isn't easy. This is one way to read this round. It's quite convenient for both sides to opt out of it and take the double win. And all the TOC points that we have.
No, I think they get.
No,
Yeah, we
get
have.
they get one, yeah.
Okay. Regardless. That's been said. Second argument I would make is there's a lot of structural things that would need to occur for any of these solvency arguments that have been articulated to actually follow through with. Number one, you want a set of enforceable norms so we're not resetting every single tournament literally to zero from whatever random batch of parents came. Y'all need to come back as alum and judge. If every single debater, and you two correct me on math if I'm wrong, if every single debater who graduated after 3 or more years of parley debate came back and did 2 tournaments, period, after graduating, there would never be a parent judge. Or it would be under 20%. Okay? So there's a lot of complaining and yelling and overly aggressive online chatter that creates situations where certain people, me, have to go and fix for a week all kinds of chaos. Because this doesn't get replicated outside of this room. So you need to come back and you need to replicate the professionalism and like reasonableness that's here elsewhere. And the people that should be shamed are people that are trying to instigate fights where fights are not necessary. Okay? Third thing I would say, and I've got 20 seconds left, is that if K debates are the things that are most exclusionary, this is a problem in my book. The thing that's most exclusionary is an inability to communicate. If the judge is incapable of understanding any scenario, that's a problem. If the debaters are incapable of communicating to various kinds of judges in a way that they find understandable, valuable, and accessible, that's also a problem. There is no singular causality problem here, but I find every single time I'm in one of these discussions, we circle back to the same half dozen things. Tech debate is exclusionary if it's too fast or it's too complicated. Some sort of articulation that says that I don't get to win right out of the gate, therefore that's bad, which is how I take a lot of the arguments to say that it's not quite accessible. That means learning curves are bad in some fashion. I disagree with this in other premise. To get you hard, it's game, can be learned. And that somehow something so narrow becomes the focal point of the discussion that we don't see the forest for the trees. I'm going to close there.
Okay, how are we gonna, what are they gonna do?
We're going to flip a coin. So, since they called the flip, you called the flip. If you win the flip, you get the first place flip.
Oh, there's
Okay?
only one?
There's only one.
Oh, well.
It's your last
No,
one.
no, no.
That's yours.
No,
No.
Take it.
This looks
wait,
like
did we
all
call?
of my Asian
I have not looked at the
Oh,
coin.
okay.
Tails.
They
Okay.
take
Which
the
one do you
trophy.
want?
Okay.
I flipped it over. And
Get out of here, go home.
They choose the second place trophy.
Okay, done. Thank you for coming. Go over.
Thank you for hosting.
Yep. See you.
Sam, let's go.
Yes, sir. Well, there's no security. We have to. Really?
Yes.
Oh.
Get out of this building. Get up and leave.
Neil,
Will this be posted on the NPDL website?
Go now.
Because I want to show it to our administrators.